Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. Today we're taking a look at some interesting cards currently trending on the market. Of course, Maze of Millenia officially comes out this week, bringing with it a couple of very strong cards with huge meta implications. But aside from that, we're actually looking at our usual trends based off of the OCG, as well as what players are potentially looking at using in the TCG over the next several months. Before we start though, a couple of things I want to mention. So the first is that I'm going to be adding a couple of things to the Market Watch here today, where I show you guys some of the deck list samples from over in the OCG that I've seen online, so that you guys can take a look at what I'm seeing, as well as pulling some of the price trend graphs and such off of TCG Player. This is a bit more work on my end, so let me know in the comments what you guys think of it and if you think it's worth continuing to do in the future or not. One other thing is that we now have a discount code live over at dimmytcg.ca. I know for a lot of you guys watching this, especially you Canadians, it can be hard to find good websites to buy cards and pre-sales from, but Dimmy TCG is a really well-known online seller that I'd encourage all of you guys to check out. I'll leave a link in the description below, and if you use my code NISHI5 at checkout, you'll get 5% off of your order on everything except for pre-sales. Anyways guys, let's jump into today's Market Watch. Alright, to kick things off, we're going to take a look at Bonfire. So, of course, Bonfire is the card that the entire Yu-Gi-Oh community has been freaking out about over the course of the past 2 weeks. It all started with some pre-sales having this card up at around $80, then it went up to $100, then $120, and then of course $130. Now, Bonfire is a card that everyone is looking forward to from Maze of Millenia, as it can be used to search out Snake Eye Ash, who in turn searches for Snake Eye Populace after Phantom Nightmare drops. It's the card everyone is panicking about and trying to get their hands on, because it has been a big reason for the Snake Eye engine being so dominant over in the OCG, and of course everyone is expecting the same thing to happen here in the TCG as well. However, we're just having Bonfire and the rest of the Maze of Millenia cards officially released starting yesterday, and we're already starting to see the cards' prices decline pretty quickly. As you guys can see here, I'm checking this around the middle of the day on Wednesday, and we're already seeing the price come down to around the $95 mark, and most players don't even have access to the product yet. As much as Bonfire is an amazing card, we've seen online that the card isn't short printed, and for the most part people are pulling around 4 ultra rares per box, as opposed to the usual 3 that we've seen recently for side sets, so this card is actually probably going to be much easier to pull than I think a lot of players are expecting. That said, I think that the card's price declining is inevitable. I get the sense that a lot of players are buying into Maze of Millenia, seeing that $130 pre-sale price of Bonfire and thinking they'll just automatically make their money back off of the one card, and obviously that's not going to be sustainable. Although the card could go up more in the long run, say a month or so from now after YCS Las Vegas, I think that the card is going to decline over the next couple of weeks as people get their hands on the product, and I'm fully expecting Bonfire to settle between the $70 to $80 mark per copy. Next, the other card we have to look at from Maze of Millenia is Transaction Rollback. This is of course the card that players are hyped to see in Labyrinth. You can banish this card from your graveyard to copy the effect of another normal trap card. Now in Labyrinth, you can discard this card with your furniture pieces and copy the effect of Big Welcome Labyrinth, effectively meaning you can use Big Welcome twice per turn on turn 0, since the deck plays both Coup Clock and Arius to hopefully allow you to activate trap cards right away. Over in the OCG, this card and Rumple Twofold are 2 trap cards that really elevated Labyrinth to be a top tier contender for a little bit over there, and players are excited to see what the deck can do here in the TCG, especially after the most recent ban list. However, just like with Bonfire, Transaction Rollback's price is falling significantly. I was looking at the card on Tuesday night, and TCG Player had the card at around $75, but now on Wednesday the card has already fallen down to $60. I think that for the few players that do have access to the product, they're already just starting to undercut each other, and this should lead to the prices steadily declining over the next couple of weeks. If you guys take a look at these breakdowns of the meta over in the OCG, as shown on roadoftheking.com, even before the most recent ban list, Labyrinth really hasn't been all that relevant. There's been a bit of success from them recently, but for the most part, the format has been dominated by a combination of Fire Kings and Rescue Ace, and I think it's very likely that this remains true here in the TCG as well, with Labyrinth remaining overshadowed. That said, I'm actually expecting Transaction Rollback to have the biggest fall off of any card in the set, and settle around the $30 to $40 mark. I don't think that Labyrinth is going to be good enough to compete with Fire King Snake Eye or even Voiceless Voice, so my expectation is that the card will fall off quite hard. The deck may see success in a very short window, from when Maze of Millenia is released up until when Phantom Nightmare is released, and it may be a good card down the road as well, especially after we see another ban list or 2, but for now, in the short term, expect Transaction Rollback to decline in price very quickly. Aside from those couple of things, there's not too much else that I'm worried about from Maze of Millenia, so instead we're going to move on to a couple of other cards, starting with Odd Eyes Revolution Dragon. So this card is a pendulum monster that has a lot of text on it, but really it has just one effect that we care about. Part of its monster effect is that you can discard it from your hand and pay 500 life points to add a level 8 or lower dragon pendulum monster from your deck to your hand. Over in the OCG, this card is used in a big pendulum pile deck, which makes use of Super Heavy Samurais, Draco Slayers, and the new Magispector Porcupine from Phantom Nightmare. At first, I thought that Revolution Dragon was used to search for Darkworm, but Darkworm isn't actually in this list. Rather, it's used to search for Luster Pendulum, a card that helps fill up the extra deck with another body to pendulum summon out later, as well as search for another pendulum monster of the same name. With Revolution Dragon, this card has two printings, the original Secret Rares from Rise of the Duelist, which are actually up at around $10 each, and the reprint Tin Ultras, which are still at around $1. This card has limited availability, and it's one of those cards that seems pretty easy to forget. By now you're probably a bit too late to invest in the secrets, but the Ultras at $1 each probably aren't too bad of a pickup if you're just grabbing a few copies. Just remember that the OCG still has Electromite unbanned, a big part of why pendulum decks are so much more viable over in the OCG than they are in the TCG, so just because this particular deck did well at a tournament over there, that doesn't mean we're going to see similar success from pendulums here in the TCG. Moving on, the next card here is TG Screw Serpent. This card is a pretty simple card. On summon, it lets you target a level 4 or lower TG monster in your graveyard, special summon it, but then negate its effect. I don't think that this card itself is really scary or anything like that, but this is actually a brick in another deck that we talked about in our previous Market Watch. The list you guys are seeing on screen here is from over in the OCG. It's basically a World Chalice Snake Eye deck, where the original Sinful Spoils is used as a bridge piece to summon out TG Rocket Salamander, which is a 1-card IB that turns on your entire World Chalice side. I believe that the artifact monster that they play here is called Mjolnir, and there's a combo you can do where you summon it to your opponent's side of the field, and it locks them into only summoning artifact monsters. I don't know how amazing this deck is. It seems like it runs way too many bricks for my liking, but maybe it's a foundational piece for a really cool deck that might come up in the TCG later on. Anyways, Screw Serpent has just one printing as a rare from Savage Strike. This card never got any sort of Megatin reprint or anything like that. Because of that, this card is randomly a $5 rare, with barely any copies available on TCG Player right now. Personally, I wouldn't be buying this card at this price. If anything, you guys should just be looking to pick up a few copies of TG Rocket Salamander. However, this is an awesome card for you to try to look at digging up out of your bulk, and then trying to offload it just in case it gets randomly reprinted in something like an OTS tournament pack. Alright, this one's a pretty interesting card. It's Lambi of Obedience. So I remember when this card first came out, a lot of players were thinking it might be an amazing side deck tech card. Its effect is pretty straightforward. You pay 2,000 life points and declare a monster name. Your opponent takes that monster from their deck and chooses to either give it to you to add to your hand or special summons it to your side of the field in attack mode, ignoring its summoning conditions. It's definitely a strange card and has been a bit weird to use. If you declare a hand trap like Ash Blossom or Droll, your opponent will probably just choose to summon it to your side of the field, making it pretty useless. At the same time, however, not all combo pieces can be used so easily out of the hand either, so a monster that they give to you and add to your hand might not be that useful depending on the situation. However, Snake Eye Populace sort of breaks the whole dilemma. If Snake Eye Populace is added to your hand, it's special summoned out automatically, so Lullaby may as well say that you get to special summon a Populace out of your opponent's deck. This could actually be really devastating. A lot of lists are only choosing to play 2 copies of Populace since it is searchable, so if your opponent has one in hand and you take the other, they might not have a copy to search off of Ash. Now, this card isn't terribly expensive. It was first an ultra rare from a duelist pack, but then it got a secret rare upgrade in the Kaiba collection. Despite being talked about as a tech option a few times over the past several years, it's actually not too expensive of a card. Either copy is going to cost you about $3 each right now, but you guys can see from the charts here that this card has historically sat around $1 to $1.50, with the card clearly trending upwards recently. This card may be worth looking at picking up if you can grab them for $1 or $2, but still look to flip it if you can find someone who's really actively buying into the hype. I think you're generally better off with side deck cards that have wider variety of applications. Even if Fire Kings do take over a significant portion of the meta, I think there are better options available. Moving on, we next have Chimera, the King of Phantom Beasts. So with this card, I'm speculating a little bit, but I think that Chimera might be a pretty solid pickup right now. This card is a fusion monster that's responsible for ripping a card out of the opponent's hand. The Chimera deck, I think, has got a lot of players off guard with how easily it can generate advantage and how disruptive it can actually be. However, I definitely think that this is a card you guys should be looking at now. We have several new illusion cards coming out in Phantom Nightmare, which should help to improve the engine. At the same time, I believe that Chimera actually meshes really well with the yugioh strategy. That might be the best way to play yugioh, and that'll naturally turn a lot of players to the deck since yugioh is going to be a pretty popular fan favorite strategy. However, looking at the price of Chimera, it's sitting just under the $10 mark. This is actually one of the lowest price points that the card has seen since its release. Early on when Chimera was first being hyped, it was at around 20, but it has done nothing but fall since, as players expect the fire decks to take over the format. Those fire decks are still going to be really dominant, but for those players that are looking for a change of pace or to try out some of the other new cards from Phantom Nightmare at their locals, there's definitely going to be a reason for this card to move. So yeah, nothing too crazy with this one, but I think that if you can pick these up for around $6 to $7, it's a pretty solid buy. This card shouldn't be reprinted until the 2024 tins, so you still have at least half a year before you really need to worry about offloading it. And finally, one last card for us to take a look at is Exosister's Magnifica. This card is of course an extra deck monster for the Exosister archetype, being the card that they aim to end on by using 2 rank 4 Exosister Xyz monsters as material. This card is the deck's boss monster, being able to attack twice, as well as non-targeting banish a card your opponent controls, and it can also tag out into one of the rank 4s that you use to make it during your opponent's turn. Now, in the landscape of the current game, I don't think there's too much of a reason for this card to be trending upwards. It's not like Exosisters are a particularly strong deck right now. However, with so much of the rest of the deck being reprinted in the 2023 tins, and the deck obviously being a waifu archetype that'll appeal to a lot of casual players, there's a ton of people looking to put the deck together. Magnifica is the one expensive piece that lacks a reprint, so players have been buying them up over the last little while, and of course, there are only so many that people can list back onto the market. As a result, as you can see from the graph below, within the last couple of weeks we've seen the card shoot up from being around $16 or $17 to just over the $20 mark. I think that the other thing with this card is that it could have been reprinted anywhere. In Maze, we definitely could have seen something like this reprinted instead of something like Turbulence or Bunbuku. It's just a matter of when Konami's going to choose to reprint it. The other place I'm suspecting that this card might be randomly included is Battles of Legend Chapter 1, but obviously there's no guarantee. It's just sort of a random decision by Konami. Hopefully this card does get reprinted soon, because if not, because it appeals to so many casual players, I could definitely see this card hitting the $30 mark eventually. Alright guys, that's all we have for today's episode. Definitely a bit more work to put this one together. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this format. We'll see how the video does and see if I can include it in all of the future market watches moving forward. But if you guys did enjoy today's episode, please make sure that you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.